Okay, well, welcome everybody. I'm Bob Carlton with College Matchpoint, and I'm joined this evening by Julie Ritchie and Allison Randall, also of College Matchpoint. And we're part of the team at College Matchpoint that has worked for the last 13 years with kids applying to UT Austin. This evening's conversation is about navigating specifically this year's version of the UT Austin application. College Matchpoint was started 13 years ago by Lisa Bain Carlton. Over that time, our group has been focused on helping students prepare to thrive in the college that they select. We've been super lucky to work with kids who have gotten into all different types of schools. Many of them have applied and been accepted to UT Austin, most of them not auto admit. And so we're equally as excited when a student gets Plan 2 or Canfield Honors as we are when they're admitted to another school. But we are really aware, and it's the reason we have this webinar, that UT Austin has increasingly become a popular school, not just in the state of Texas, but nationally. What we hope to do this evening is orient you to the choices that a student can make and the way in which UT Austin implements their holistic review. Now, holistic review is a college admissions phrase which basically means we want to learn everything we can about a student. They're not just a number to us. They're in fact an academic student, an extracurricular student, a friend, a member of the community, and UT has really blazed a trail for considering students holistically. As a flagship university, they make choices about what they emphasize, what they read, what they allow students to submit. The first thing we want to emphasize to you is UT Austin reads everything that a student submits. They're very interested in transcript, and they'll pull it apart to see what a student's class choices were like over her high school years, what her grades were like in a particular field of study, math or the sciences. They're also, over the last couple of years, implementing a test optional policy, and we'll talk about testing a little later. UT Austin is a school that is distinct in their emphasis on major, a term that they've coined called fit to major, and they're going to read the application, the transcript, the weighting of the component pieces of the test scores, the resume, the essays, as it relates to fit to major. And while UT doesn't indicate that demonstrated interest is an important read, we are always working under the assumption that colleges want to admit students who are interested in going to that school. And UT's made a change in their essays this year to underscore that. Now, students always ask us, parents always ask us, are they really going to read all this? Our team was talking when UT rolled out their updated admissions prompts about a month ago, that students really are going to spend about 2,000 words over the 5 essays telling their story of who they are. Our answer emphatically to all the students and parents on this workshop is yes, they're going to read those essays. They're going to read that resume, and they're going to read that because they want to admit students, not numbers. And our first suggestion for all students applying to UT is to spend the time telling your distinct personal story. You've worked really hard in high school, particularly during this pandemic, to forge that story. UT invites you to tell that story. And for many students, UT invites you to communicate what are your distinctive activities that communicate your fit to your first choice major. Mechanically, just to explain that, here's what UT's admissions results looked like from this past year. These are from UT's own review of admissions results. Test optional dramatically expanded the number of applications that UT Austin received. Many students in the past who would have thought, I'm not going to apply to UT because I just don't have a test score in their range, this year made a choice. I am going to apply to UT. So UT had the largest number of undergraduate applications in their history. UT is test optional. Just really want to confirm that. They do not penalize a student if a student does not submit her test scores. But on the other hand, they're very clear on the range that those test scores typically fall in. A little later, we'll talk about testing because we know it's an area of many questions for folks. We do want to highlight the 5 top colleges that applicants listed as their first choice major. First off, a reminder, at UT Austin, computer science is in the College of Natural Sciences. Canfield School of Engineering, one of the most competitive schools in the United States. McComb's extraordinary business program. Students apply an undefined major to McComb's. They're not choosing a business specialization like finance or accounting. And then communications, where the Moody College of Communications has always been an innovator and has added a number of new majors. Now, there are families on this webinar that we work with. There are families in the state of Texas, and there are students and families outside the state of Texas. The first observation on the student base is the residency of students. This past year was consistent with other years. The overwhelming majority of students admitted to UT Austin are Texas residents. Out-of-state students and international students, you're looking at a substantially more competitive admit rate than even the 32% admit rate that UT Austin saw this year. We also observed to families that if you're then choosing competitive majors like computer science, engineering, or business or nursing, you're then almost doubling the intensity of a student's read in terms of out of state. Now, it's not a concern enough for a student to change her major. We always communicate to students, choose the major that you most want to focus 4 years of college on. But the first observation for out of state families is you probably are aware that UT has, the state of Texas has a top 6% auto admit rule. And generally speaking, students from out of state need to have an even stronger academic positioning, as well as the resume and essay that tell a compelling story. In terms of that resume or essay, UT did a phenomenal job summarizing some of the key aspects. A large percentage, more than 10% of the students who applied were involved in some job or internship during high school. You see the national, state, and international awards, the formal leadership in addition to informal leadership. So this gives you a snapshot of this past year in terms of the holistic read at UT. Now, I want to take a moment to remind everybody in terms of Zoom, please feel free to share your questions in the Q&A box. If they apply to everyone, we'll totally try to cover them. Julie is our designated question answerer. And then if they're one-on-one, we're happy to follow up and share any insights. Now, I mentioned before this idea of fit to major. UT is really doing a student a favor. They're asking the student to articulate the activities that they've had during their high school experience that increases the odds that they'll graduate in 4.5 years at UT Austin. They are really saying to a student, because we're so big and there are so few seats, we want to make sure that if you're applying to a competitive major like McComb's or Cockrell or computer science in the College of Natural Sciences, we want to make sure not just that you know what you're getting into, but that you're an accomplished programmer, You're an experienced business person. You've done a whole series of engineering projects, and you bring to UT Austin that expertise, that initiative. Now, those majors are far more competitive, and they're far more competitive even with qualified applicants. UT Austin will almost always tell you the strength of their business program or engineering program or computer science are so significant that they can actually populate 3, 4, even 5 other colleges of their size with students who just miss in terms of the holistic read for that department, for that major. A reminder here in terms of fit to major, you really are able in that fit to major to tell that story. Now, you are asked in the application to list your first and second choice major. For the majority of students, the first choice major is the only pertinent choice. For students who are auto admit, a reminder, students who are auto admit still have to be read competitively for these competitive majors. And that's why the second choice major can in fact be meaningful, where UT would very much like to admit the student. They might not quite fit for their first choice major, and they're going to consider them very strongly for that second choice major. Because again, remember, top 6% in the state of Texas auto admit. Now, a couple of other comments. The School of Nursing has always been a competitive major, not just at UT, but nationally, and it continues to be competitive. And then we have noticed just over the last 3 to 5 years that many of the science majors in the College of Natural Sciences have become increasingly competitive, as well as economics and psychology. A note about economics: there are families, there are students who look at the competitiveness McCombs and say, hey, I think I'll apply for economics as an incoming freshman and transfer into McCombs. A comment here: while it occasionally can happen, the best understanding a student can have is that your single best shot of getting into these competitive majors is as an incoming freshman. It is very, very difficult for a student to transfer into McCombs or Cockrell or computer science. So the thing to understand about fit to major is that ultimately students are making a choice. Am I UT or bust? At which point I might want to think about specifically, is econ the best fit versus business? Not from a gaming the system standpoint, but really from a question about where am I best suited academically and experience-wise. Versus some students who look at the McCombs program or Cockrell and say, this is absolutely where I want to be. I want to be an aerospace engineer. UT is one of my schools, but I have other schools. And it's not simply a UT or bust strategy. Now, we mentioned before that the focus of this workshop is on this year's process. Historically, undergraduate studies has been a program where students who are undeclared can pursue a first 2 years at UT Austin. This year, UT Austin proactively announced that undergraduate studies no longer existed, that it was no longer an option for incoming applying students. And as a result, UT is strengthening their focus on fit to major. They're providing a clear indication to students that in the past, a program that was specifically targeted at students who still had not chosen among majors was no longer an option. Now, a reminder, there are so many great colleges where that choice of major is part of a student's 4 years of experience at that school. Absolutely, that is the expectation, that they will spend that time at that school exploring and understanding their major. That is not UT Austin. UT Austin is a school that says, we want you to come here knowing where you want us to help accelerate your momentum. Now, There are still options for students who are undecided, but they're specifically within a set of schools, okay? You have liberal arts undeclared, natural science undeclared, communications undeclared. An observation on fit to major. There's still a story that needs to be told about why you fit this option. It can't simply be, I'm applying to natural sciences undeclared because UGS no longer exists, because undergraduate studies no longer exist. It has to be a story where you know natural science is your focus, but you're still trying to decide which of the disciplines in natural sciences are the best fit for you. The second thing that we always encourage students to do is to really think broadly in terms of majors. Over the past several years, UT has introduced a whole host of extraordinarily innovative majors. This year, I'm a big fan of a brand new undergraduate major in the School of Information, informatics. It's a great major for a student who's integrating interests and aptitudes around computer science, data, and design. UT has been known historically for having an incredible program around the creative arts. And as a result, they rolled out a couple of years ago an arts and entertainment technologies major. UT Austin has an extraordinary undergraduate degree in Black Studies. We really urge students, particularly those that start focusing on UT in sophomore or junior year, to think broadly about majors that fit their interest, aptitudes, skills, and motivations, rather than simply trying to continue to focus on a small set of majors. Allison, anything to add? No? Great. Okay. So, Allison, could you tell us a little bit, I alluded to it before, a little bit about this idea of an expanded resume?
Absolutely. So, the first thing that I think is important to when the students that we work with, we talk to them about is that while an academic resume obviously mirrors what lots of people know in a professional resume, it's a little different in that UT is interested in knowing all of the things that you did while you weren't sitting in a classroom or watching Netflix. Most of the students I work with will say, well, I wasn't sure if this counts. I read 45 books a month during COVID, but I wasn't sure if that counts. I built a computer, but I wasn't sure if that counts. Basically, anything that students are doing during high school, so the time frame that begins the summer after 8th grade and extends through when they graduate, yes, all the traditional activities, sports, music, band, all those things, but also sometimes even more interesting are the untraditional, unconventional things that a student might be doing with their time, especially in the time that students have had outside of a traditional school environment due to COVID. So the first thing is, it all counts, especially at UT. The next thing is that students, again, like Bob said, are getting to tell the story that UT wants, that UT is really interested in hearing about their experiences in high school. One of the things that it really helps do is communicate, demonstrate, and provide evidence for that fit to major. It's also a great way for a student to see whether or not they are a fit for a highly competitive major. And so those activities always go right up top. UT loves a long resume. It could be more than 4 pages. And most importantly, UT is specifically looking for, in addition to just the titles and dates and the roles the student has, is what did it look like when they were doing it? What initiative did they take? What impact did they make? And so in addition to describing, I played varsity lacrosse, UT is interested in hearing, were you the person that set up the group chat so that the freshmen could immediately get connected with an upperclassman? things that may not seem important, but that really demonstrate not just that the student did the activity, but how your particular student does it.
Now, two other observations to make about this expanded resume. Most adults have either spent time on their own resume or might be a hiring manager and reviewed resumes. It is tempting as an adult not to spend hours considering the font choice for this for this resume, the choices around layout, even from a good intention point of view, saying to a colleague who's a designer, could you help my student lay out her resume? And our answer is, it is always great to help a student, but understand, just as resumes nowadays for jobs are usually scraped into an applicant tracking system, pure text, understand that the layout is substantially less important than the initiative and impact that a student is communicating in the bullets under their activities. The second observation here is that Allison has talked about that there are some choices to be made around formatting. There isn't a perfect format. There isn't a UT approved, it should be in this section. We do generally believe that students are well suited putting their activities related to fit to major as close to the top as possible. And then a final question, Allison, can you maybe speak a little to the questions of how much should you talk about outside of the classroom in terms of activities versus activities you did in the classroom?
That's a great question. So outside of the classroom activities, obviously super important. Whether or not, I would say the classes that a student takes during the course of high school obviously are going to be listed on their transcript. So listing courses on the resume isn't recommended unless, especially for engineering and computer science, those may involve a ton of projects. And so being able to speak specifically, not so much about the time spent in class, but if there were independent projects, independent research that really can help speak to the student's initiative, impact, and level of skill, interest, and curiosity about a specific field, that can be a great addition to a resume. I would also say that students who are participating in the International Baccalaureate curriculum also have an opportunity to outline some specific projects that they're doing that go beyond the transcript, that really talk about the details of a research process or the design of a project. Those are great details to include in a resume.
One of the next items that UT asks all students to submit, obviously, is a transcript. It'll come from the high school. To reiterate what we mentioned before, UT automatically admits eligible Texas students in the top 6% of their high school graduating class. The state of Texas is even specific what percentage of first-year students have to be auto-admit. We do also want to underscore that beyond auto-admit, UT disproportionately admits students that are highly ranked in their high school. Now, students and families outside of the state of Texas oftentimes comment, hey, my high school doesn't rank. And as a result, a reminder that if the high school doesn't rank, that high school will include, as part of their own policy, a submission of their school's profile and a GPA or grade distribution. A family doesn't need to request this. This is a standard function. And as a result, UT Austin is able to, if not infer, at least estimate how a student did academically within the context of their high school. So just a reminder, particularly for out-of-state families or students who are asking, well, what if I'm not in the top 6% of my high school? A reminder, That's a marker that UT Austin has put. They're not 100% auto admit, but they clearly have a preference for a transcript that communicates that a student is academically ready to be on campus at UT. Again, they're doing students a favor. They're trying to make sure that it's a great match academically between the rigorous academics at UT Austin and the performance that a student has had academically at their high school. Now, a topic that oftentimes comes up, particularly in a world of test optional, is what does test optional actually mean? Test optional at UT Austin means all students applying for undergraduate admissions have the option to not submit test scores. Now, for each and every student, other than students who got 36s or 1600s, there is probably some consideration that they'll need to make about their current score, their first choice major, their transcript, their resume. There is not a formula that says, if you have a test score at this level, submit it. If you have a test score at this level, don't submit it. We do encourage families to really be conscious of this, to consider this, to make a choice here, but also to be reminded that UT Austin has always been a school that put a focus on transcript. And then over the last 2 years, UT Austin, in their admissions decisions, has clearly, honestly said, we're test optional. We're not going to penalize you if you choose not to submit your test scores. So the takeaway for this for students is, A, consider the major you're applying to, your transcript, and your overall resume and fit to major when you make a choice whether or not to submit a test score. And then second, if you're considering whether or not to prep and take one more SAT or ACT this fall, to really think about what your current score is, what kind of score improvement you're hoping for, the amount of energy you have to prep successfully, and then finally, your major choice, the impact on that investment of time. Allison, do you want to talk a little bit about the advice we give for families when a student says, hey, should I wait to submit until I have all my testing done? Should I wait on submitting my application to UT Austin?
So I would say one of the things, and Julie, feel free to jump in here too, is that typically we say, if a student is done testing, satisfied with their test score, and clear that they want to submit it, UT is going to ask, are you submitting a test score or not? So students in that category, we recommend, yep, go ahead and submit that test score. If you're unsure, still testing, not sure if you're going to take the test optional option or not, hold off until you have the information you need to know about that decision.
Great. All right. Essays, a topic that we really urge students to take the time and the energy to consider and to dive into. Allison, will you tell us a little bit about what students should consider as they navigate the essay opportunity at UT Austin?
Absolutely. I would say that a high percentage of the students that we work with, when they begin their work with us and we ask them, what's your biggest concern about the college process, essays is usually at the top of the list. They've been hearing about college essays a long time. And it's one of those situations where, while it seems simple, they know the stakes are high. So it can get worrisome in ways that it doesn't need to be. The number one thing to remember is that every essay is truly an opportunity for the student to share something about themselves that isn't visible in other part of the applications. I think a lot of times students come to the essay process thinking that every essay is the equivalent of a cover letter, where they need to really talk about all the activities, basically regurgitate their resume and make sure that the admissions officers have that information front and center. The good news is at UT, they're reading that resume line by line. And so the essays are an opportunity to go a little deeper, to show something that maybe is alluded to on a surface level in the resume, that you get into some depth. One of my favorite functions of essays is when they actually bring the resume even more to life. For example, had a student years ago who had played every sport for a year. And that resume did every sport for a year. Now, you can make a lot of assumptions about what that was about. And the personal statement that she wrote was about how she's an engineer at heart. And her goal in playing every sport was literally to test her own limits and to see what was different about how she reacted and what her body could do in different environments. She's now studying engineering and very happy doing so. And if we hadn't had that essay, you could have had a very different experience with that resume. So being able to really show, the other thing is admissions officers want to get to know the humans behind the applications. They're not just reviewing credentials, they're building communities. And so this is the opportunity for them to really get a sense of not just what you can do, but who you are and how you might impact others on campus, in and outside of the classroom. The essay that most students worry the most about and have heard the most about is the personal statement, which is kind of in the media. That's the college essay that everyone is thinking about and hearing about. This is the opportunity to tell a story that demonstrates positive, unique characteristics about yourself. It's an opportunity for admissions teams to get to know you as a person, what's important to you, your values. And I would say one of the biggest, I think, myths about this essay is that it needs to be what we call a neon moment. Students will come to me and say, well, nothing's really happened to me. I haven't really had, this experience where, I almost fell off a mountain, or, something particularly difficult or tragic happened. Those don't necessarily need to be the topic. Some of the best college essays are about baking cakes or mowing the lawn, and basically just a student telling a story where they get to share a little bit of themselves. It takes the place not of a cover letter or a resume, but of an interview. So what might come across about a student if they were sitting across from you? What might jump out at you about their enthusiasm for something, their sense of humor, things like that? That's really what the personal statement is all about. It's about between 500 and 700 words, which for most of our students is not very long. Most students are coming to the application table having written a lot longer. And it really is the ability to show and reflect on something that happened. It is that reflection that makes it unique, not necessarily what the story is about, but the student's perception of why it was meaningful that really speaks to the admissions team. Julie, would you add anything to that?
Well, what I would add is, if you are stuck on trying to figure out what you want to write about, some of the things I've been doing lately with students that has been really successful is getting them to think about turning points that have been impactful to them in high school. Not necessarily big ones, but if they think back on, like in a book or a movie, when there's a turning point, the story moves forward, right? So in your own life in high school, if you think back, what was a turning point where your story moved forward? You made a decision to join something, or you decided to do something, or whatever it could be. What was that? How did your story move forward, and what did you learn from that, or how did you grow? That's sparked a lot of great conversations and brainstorming with some of my students lately.
And I think too, Julie, some of my favorite essays like that are essays when what initially presented itself as something that maybe wasn't so great, like not making a particular team, turned into a turning point that now they can look back on and say, wow, that really changed the trajectory. And the fact that I could navigate whatever that disappointment was or that unexpected change now teaches me that I'm someone who can do that. And that is a phenomenal person to have on a college campus.
Totally agree.
Two other observations. Obviously, this time of year, we work with so many students who are working on their personal statement. The first observation is parents, avoid the temptation to make it our essay. College admissions readers are really adept at spotting essays that are not in the student's voice. This has to be the distinctive story that only your student can write. And students understand, they've read your resume. You don't need to waste an essay giving color commentary on your resume. This isn't a marketing piece. I always challenge students to think, if you had 5 minutes to talk to an admissions director about some unique opportunity or challenge you've had in high school, what would you talk about? And how would you want them to remember you? And we've had countless students who have taken that challenge, that opportunity, and we want to reiterate, we understand how hard this is. If you're a 17 or 18-year-old, self-reflection is not something that comes natural to you. I had a student the other day say, do you understand this is the last thing in the world I want to do on a gorgeous August day? And the answer is, we absolutely understand that. And give yourself the chance to do the humble brag, to talk about yourself, but also to share about the struggles you might have had that built you into the resilient student who will thrive at UT Austin. Allison, this year, UT has made some changes to their short answer supplements. Before we go through them prompt by prompt, can you talk a little bit at a high level about the idea of the short answer supplements at UT Austin?
Absolutely. The first thing that I would say is, once you've written a personal statement or even just knowing that one exists, when you see the short answers, it can be counterintuitive to realize that in many ways, these are as or more important than that personal statement for several reasons. And so my first piece of advice is take them seriously, take your time. They are a little bit more challenging than they look, and it's absolutely worth the time to take to really polish them, to really make sure you're answering the prompt. And one of the kind of the bonus round of these is letting them work together to complement each other. So one of the things that that we do at College Matchpoint is we take all the prompts and put them together, put them next to each other, literally on a grid, and we literally map. Okay, if the personal statement's going to focus on this piece of you, where does that piece of you that joined rowing as a freshman and ultimately, became really good at it, even though you hated it for the first 2 years, where does that go, right? And so we really look at ways to not only make sure that each essay is getting its due and that you're spending the time to make sure that you've answered the prompt, but really, how can they work together? So for example, the student that I talked about who played every sport because she was an engineer, she told that story in her personal statement. She was also someone that was really passionate about service. And so we wanted to make sure that that piece of her got its due in another essay. She was also someone that had navigated a learning difference, which also demonstrates some resilience. And so we really looked for ways, we think about those factors, like Julie said, that really build you into who you are. If you can get even a few of those stories to come out in these, they really build on each other and create a really rich, complex view of you for the admissions team. And so thinking not just each one knock it out, but thinking about them together and how they might complement each other. Julie, anything to add here?
No, I think you did a beautiful job. The only thing I'd add is make sure to use specific examples. Like the worst, what is not your friend is generalities. So give deep examples with lots of specifics.
Two good examples of that. I have always been interested in computer science. That's really wonderful for an 8th grader. For a student who is applying for a competitive program like UT Austin is looking for specificity, areas where you've translated that interest into involvement, into initiative and impact. And then the second specific thing, and I think Allison and Julie are constantly encouraging students to do this, answer the question, what is your first choice major? I plan on majoring in economics at UT Austin. You do not want someone on your major's essay to try to infer what major you're applying to.
I always like to say for our students that this is your opportunity to make the admission reader's job easy. Just keep it so clear. Like, absolutely, look how much I'm an engineer. We want to make it just so easy for them to do their job, to see not only what you can add to the campus, but that fit to major piece is one of the first things that they're going to be concerned about. So let's just knock it out for them, make it super easy, and get it in the first couple sentences of that major essay. The other thing that I would say, like Julie said, to be specific. The other thing is to be specific about UT. If they ask how you're going to make an impact, rather than saying, I'm going to be active in the classroom, talk about specifically what that might look like. I'm really curious and I ask 1,000 questions, and I really look forward to contributing that to the classrooms that I participate in at UT. Or there's an organization that I'm super passionate about joining, and I'm going to invite my friends to do it with me. And so like that level of specificity that's going to take a little research is really going to demonstrate to UT not only that you will contribute, but that you've already started thinking about how.
Now, Allison, one of the biggest changes this year is that UT Austin made some substantial revisions to the supplemental essays, the short answer supplements that are required. Could you take us through those new 4 short answer supplements? One of them was existing. And can you talk a little bit with Julie about what you're encouraging students to focus on?
Absolutely. So the first choice major essay is one that they have utilized in, they used it last year and a few years before. And so that one, and that wasn't a surprise that they kept that one, because first choice major fit to major is so important. And so we kind of talked a little bit about that one. That is really your opportunity. It's more like, I like to think of it as like more like a piece of, you're giving them the evidence. It's almost like a, Julie, what do you call it? Like a closing argument in a court case about how here's why, right? So it's really just outlining very clear, very specific evidence that not only do I fit to this major, but I'm going to thrive in it and I'm going to contribute to others while I do that. The next one is really about what skills, perspectives, or talents. So really, I like when I work with my students, I say, so there's a thing about you. There's lots of things about you, but what's a thing about you that's going to help you make a positive impact at UT? It's probably the thing about you that you contribute in high school or in your family. One of my favorite examples of this is a student last year who was talking about the thing about me, I can talk to anybody. I can literally make my way through a group of strangers and find something interesting about every person. Wouldn't that be a wonderful person to have on campus? And so really thinking about, what is that? Who are you in your friend group? Who are you in the classroom? What is that thing about you that you bring naturally to environments and social environments and academic environments? What is that thing and what will that look like at UT? Julie, you want to jump in on this one with anything?
No, I think you did a beautiful job. Yeah, I think it's, again, specifics about how you will do it at UT, not just generalities.
One other comment here before we move on to the next one. Students oftentimes say, I haven't been president of an organization. I haven't been secretary of an organization. We really encourage students to think about informal leadership skills in their community. Were you that young person who in your community during COVID and during this pandemic have taken care of neighbors, have reached out to family members, have taken an informal leadership role? Please understand that as important to UT as titles or formal leadership. Allison, what about one of the new essays here around what we think of as why UT?
So I am personally a huge fan of this essay. And it's basically how it's asking students to really dream big and to dream big about how going to UT isn't just going to benefit them, but how is it going to benefit the larger community and ultimately the world? So my students that I've worked with this, and this is a really hard question to answer in any year, but specifically after everything that this class has gone through with COVID, where their restrictions have gotten kind of increased at every turn, now saying like, you know what? Anything goes, just dream big. One of the things I tell my students is, I just gave you $15 million. What would you do with that to make the world a better place? Like, go, don't censor, just dream. It doesn't have to be something, this isn't a business plan. It doesn't have to be something they're not gonna read it and be like, well, that was a dumb idea. They really wanna see you dream, and in that, they're really seeing your values come through. What is important to you? I've had students discuss Austin Pets Alive. I've had students discuss global climate change. And so really thinking about what are those issues that are really important to you. And then the next step of the essay is really identifying outside of your major, even outside of the classroom, this enormous university filled with resources in terms of people, in terms of mentors, in terms of connections and organizations. How might that help you? And so that's almost like a research project scavenger hunt to figure out like, whoa, even outside of my major, there's this cool certificate program that'll help me learn more about environmental sustainability and advocacy. So I'm gonna do that. Also, there's this amazing student organization where I could even develop some leadership skills while I get involved in advocating for sustainable architecture. And then finally, I'm attending a university where many people are having to write this essay. So there are other world changers around me. How might that be a resource as you look forward in changing the world? How is just being around all those other fellow students a resource to you? Julie, what else you got on this one?
Well, one thing I would say is sometimes the change the world, you know, the way that's phrased makes students really afraid because that sounds really big and scary. And so what I encourage you to think of, how would you change the world around you? Yes. Rather than the entire global world? Because so you don't have to think on such a large scale when you're thinking about this. And that could be in, you know, small ways.
Absolutely. And then the last prompt is actually, I believe, it's one that students often worry is some sort of, like it's a trick question of some sort. But really, UT really wants to know what are the special circumstances or events that have gone on that may have impacted your academic performance. And this could be, no, this isn't actually visible on my transcript. My grades stayed the same, but here's what I was working with. Here's what I was working with online learning and my 4 little brothers and sisters who were home with me during online learning. It was really hard to manage that. Here's a learning difference that I've been navigating that was really made even more challenging by having to learn online. These are circumstances that not only does UT want to hear about, they want to hear about how you navigated them and then what you know now about yourself, what you learned about yourself in doing that. So it's really an essay, a little bit about the challenges and a whole lot about how you navigated, how you prevailed, and what you know about your own skills in terms of resilience. Julie, what else would you say about this one? Oh, you're muted.
Right. I was just answering a question, but maybe I'll just answer it live. So someone was asking on question 4, should you stay positive or show the real challenge of COVID? And I would say you should do both. And I think the best essay or the strongest essay in that case would be showing the real challenge, but also seeing if you could include some sort of positive growth or something at the end of it. So I think the positivity is really important, but the real challenge certainly that should be there. So don't shy away from that if there was a really big challenge.
As we turn our attention away from essays, a reminder here, students want the opportunity to tell their story, to not just be a number. UT Austin is responding to that desire, and we urge students to spend the time. Don't rush through these. Don't do these in one draft and hope that Grammarly catches all the errors and hit submit. Tell your story in a way that you feel like is the most compelling. And as Julie just said, make sure you share, just not on prompt number 5, but in other parts of this, the challenges that you've overcome that have made you who you are. Rather than presenting a shiny, generic set of essays and applications, present the application that only you could have presented. Now, we know that folks have lots of questions about honors programs. We actually have a post on this. We'll share in the follow-up note. There is no central honors college at UT Austin. There are honors programs across a number of individual departments, and they are extraordinary. Turing, Canfield, just an incredible number of honors programs. Pro tip, and then I'm going to ask Allison to share briefly about Plan 2. She's a graduate of Plan 2 and has worked with countless students who've been admitted to Plan 2. But a pro tip, if you're applying to a college that offers an honors program, apply for the honors program. It oftentimes presents an opportunity for your application to get a second read, not just for undergraduate admissions, but also for the honors program. Again, the more people who know your story on the 40 acres, the better chance they'll have of knowing who you are. Allison, can you tell us a little bit mechanically about how a student applies for Plan 2, and then specifically what's included in that application?
Absolutely. So Plan 2 is I would say one of the more well-known interdisciplinary honors programs at UT. Is by far not the only honors program at UT. It's a small humanities-based program that does offer that smaller experience inside the larger university, which is something that I really enjoyed. I had 8-person English classes, but I also had the whole university to appreciate all of the other pieces of college life and all the other resources of the other departments. But every student has the opportunity to indicate their interest in honors programs when they complete the Apply Texas application. One of the questions is, are you interested in an honors program? If you check yes to that, then the honors program related to your first choice school and major will be available, and there are additional questions, additional essays, short essays that each honors program will ask in order to determine your interest, determine your fit. Julie, what else would you add about honors programs?
Sorry, I was answering questions, Allison. So I would just say, don't hesitate to apply. If you have a strong academic record, go ahead and apply to the one for your major.
Allison, when a student applies to Plan 2, can you talk briefly about how they handle it mechanically in terms of their first or second choice major?
Oh, thank you. Yes. So one of the things that can be a little confusing is that it needs to, because Plan 2 exists in the College of Liberal Arts, the student will need to select the College of Liberal Arts as their first choice major and then Plan 2 as their second choice major.
Great. One of the items that mechanically is so important for students is to fulfill the desired letters of recommendation at UT Austin. UT Austin requires 2. I believe, Allison, tell me if I'm wrong, I think it was last year that UT Austin specifically said to students, you are allowed to have one of your letters of rec come from a non-teacher. Now, we do know that this is super challenging for so many students who have done online online learning. They haven't met teachers that they're asking for letters of rec. Allison, can you mention briefly the kind of criteria a student might use to choose the teacher she asks for a letter of rec from?
Absolutely. So one of the things that is out, and admissions teams understand that students have been in virtual learning and haven't gotten to know teachers. While it is ideal to have a teacher from junior year, if you honestly don't have a relationship with a junior year teacher, it's okay to ask a teacher from your sophomore year. Really, in terms of who to ask, you really want to think about a teacher that knows you as an individual and might be able to speak to how you participate in the classroom, how you learn, especially teachers. And I think this is sometimes counterintuitive. Students might say, well, you know, I didn't end up with an A in that math class, but boy, boy, did I work hard and I turned it around. That might be a terrific teacher to ask, because that teacher could talk about how you, even through online learning, showed up at the office hours and the tutoring and the things to turn that grade around. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a teacher where you got an A+. It needs to be a teacher that can tell a story about how you as an individual work in the classroom. Julie, what else would you say here?
Yeah, I think you said it really well. Like the better they know you and they can talk about your personality, your work ethic, your academic skills. And if someone is not, let's say it's your coach or someone you babysat for, that can be one. If you did a fabulous job, like during COVID, babysitting for a family, someone could probably sing your praises. So anyone who can sing your praises would be a great one to ask.
We've got a couple of minutes left and we want to talk about the mechanics and the timeline. Allison, can you talk briefly about Apply Texas and the kind of deadline that a student ought to be considering as they work on their applications?
Absolutely. So the Apply Texas application actually has a new and improved updated version of platform that they released this year. So I think the first thing to know about that is anytime someone releases a new anything, it may have some bugs. So right now, Apply Texas is kind of working through some glitches. And so the first thing to note is that this is an application that unfortunately is not very intuitive. And so when you begin that application, really make sure that you've got the time, and the patience is a great thing for families to be around for too, and to set aside the time to do it because it isn't necessarily intuitive. One of the other pro tips for Apply Texas is the application, while complicated, does not autosave. And so at the bottom of every page, you really need to save your work, because otherwise it will disappear, and that is really can be disappointing. It's a great thing to, a lot of students really want to get this application out the door. Our recommendation is it really is effective to submit this application in early to mid-September if you can, if you're ready. The most important thing, though, is to submit an application where your essays are your very best work, thoughtful, polished work that's your own. Also, that you've had time to not only do the application, but proofread the application, have your family members look through it, and make sure that it's as accurate at it and as complete. So I would say, while it would be ideal to get it submitted in September, if your best application isn't going to be submitted till a little later, submit it when it's absolutely the best application that you can submit.
Great. In terms of timeline, we find right now that many students who are targeting for that deadline, that timeline that Allison is talking about, really are deep into their short answer supplements. They've worked through their resume and their personal statement, and they're now turning their attention to the short answer supplemental essays. Technically, UT has two deadlines: a priority deadline, November 1st, which allows the students to hear earlier in the process, and then a regular admissions deadline. They do not offer early decision. And again, we just want to underscore Allison's point. A student will always, if they start with us this time of the year, say, am I behind? And the answer is, we need to take your stress down, because the most important thing isn't picking a date out of a calendar and saying, I have to be submitted by this date, but instead to give yourself the time and the space to tell the stories that you need to tell, to feel like that you've made your best case to UT Austin. Now, we've tackled a lot of questions this evening. We really appreciate your time and your energy. And we say to all the students that are on this workshop this evening, act like a Longhorn, act like you're excited to change the world. You have the opportunity to communicate that in your application to UT Austin, and that's what they want to read about. So take the opportunity, embrace the opportunity to be read holistically. Good luck over the next several weeks or months as you complete your applications. And again, we'll be following up tomorrow with this presentation and a recording of this presentation. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of the
Thanks, everyone.